Hey everyone, you're listening to the Fierce Feminine podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Harrison from melissacatherineharrison.com. In the near decade I've been coaching powerful women, I've found one of the biggest problems we face is not trusting our intuition and acting on it enough, not trusting ourselves enough. More fulfillment, more enjoyment, and more success always follow when we trust the intuitive nudges. So what stops us, and how can we tune in more? On this show, I sit down with incredible women to discuss their take on this, examples of them following the nudges, and the strategies they take so we can all do the same and rise together. I'm so glad you're joining us. Welcome back to the Fierce Feminine podcast. Today's guest is Leah Hill. Leah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Melissa. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited for this chat. This is going to be so good. Would you start us off with sharing a little bit about your personal background?
Sure. So I grew up in Connecticut and had pretty average. I was an average kid, average student. Studious, but not very athletic. I guess I really wanted to be more athletic, but I wasn't. And I grew up with a great family. I have 3 siblings and working class parents were wonderful and everything. So that was really good. But what made me different or set me apart from others was my intuition. I was, from the time I was a small child, I could see things, hear things, sense things that other people around me couldn't, or they weren't talking about it if they were. And I really felt, well, first it scared me, and it made me feel like I really was, different, isolated. I didn't know what to do with these experiences I was having. And so I tried to shut it down or block it out as much as I could growing up, which wasn't quite successful, but I tried as best I could.
Oh, goodness. So could you share a little bit about your professional background?
Oh, sure. So was trying to block out my intuition as best I could. I was able to get through high school and college. I got a business degree in college and then went and got an MBA right after undergraduate school. And so I started my career in sales and marketing and advertising and management. And I thought that was my life. I was like, okay, this is my life, my career, for a long time until, spirit came knocking on my door and said, time to wake up is really what it was.
Goodness. So I'm curious, before we dive a little bit more into the intuitive piece of this, how do you think your connection to spirit in that way maybe influenced that first part of your career?
Oh, well, definitely sensing energy, from people, walking into a meeting, and being able to sense the energy of what was going on with people in the room, sensing, things that, I always learned to trust my gut, even though early on I didn't really do that, but I would say, something doesn't feel right. If I was working on, a marketing campaign or a program or hiring someone when I was a manager as well. And I'm like, things look great on the outside, but there's something off with this person. And it was always right on, but unfortunately I didn't always realize it until it was, too late and had to deal with it later.
Well, and I think in the corporate world, what I found anyway, because I've been in, different industries, and what I found in corporate is that we're taught to, and I guess maybe this is for a little bit later in the discussion that this happens a lot with women anyway, but we're taught to rely on the data, on the external, what we can pick up with the 5 senses, as opposed to what our intuitive sense is telling us. So yeah, it makes sense to me that you maybe would have ignored some things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even when you think about a marketing campaign, the data will say, this is how you market it, and this is when to market it, and this is what to do. And it's it's still my intuition that told me when something didn't feel right. And then, yeah, you're right. Then the question was, did I listen to it or not?
Yeah, sure.
Right. Right.
So I would imagine you have some amazing, juicy intuition stories given your role and what you do in the world. So would you mind sharing a few of them with us?
Sure. Well, actually, one of the big ones actually redirected my career when I was in the marketing and sales world for a long time, and I enjoyed it. I was happy with what I did, my work and everything. But like I said, spirit came knocking and said, "Time to wake up." So as I was waking up and reading books and started taking classes, part time or weekends or something here and there, I decided to I suddenly got the inspiration or the intuition to start writing a book, a novel. And it was a fantasy novel about a sylph, so an elemental being of the air. And her job was to deliver messages to humans and other beings in the world. And I needed a reason why this young boy, the main character, could see her and hear her, but nobody else could.
Mm-hmm.
And the intuition for that hit me like it came in like a ton of bricks. It was like I don't even think I was meditating. I think I was just doing something else. And then all of a sudden it just hit me, like landed on me, that he has autism and he's nonverbal. And so he cannot express to his family or to others around him what he's seeing and hearing and experiencing with this sylph, but he can talk to her and see her. And that intuition or that inspiration redirected everything to where I was on a business trip. I was on my way home, my flight home, waiting at the gate. And there was a woman sitting across from me reading a book about, I think it was about Reiki. And at the time, I am a Reiki master. I was either doing that at the time or still learning it at the time. And I just kept hearing, talk to this woman, talk to this one, like talk to her, talk to her. And I said, okay, if I'm meant to talk to her, because I was embarrassed, I was like, what am I gonna,
Yeah.
what am I gonna say? What am I gonna do? What am I gonna say to this person sitting across from me at the gate? And I said, okay, if she makes eye contact with me, I'll say something. And then immediately her eyes just looked up from the book right at me. And it just gave me the chills. I'm getting chills now just remembering that moment. And I said, hi. And I said something like, so you're reading about Reiki, blah, blah, blah. So we start talking and she tells me she's on her way to visit her son, who was about that time 30, almost 30 years old. He's nonverbal autistic and severely autistic. And she's telling me about him. And as she's talking about him, his energy starts coming to stand like he's standing next to her. I'm seeing his energy and he starts communicating with me. And it was just amazing experience.
I just
Amazing.
got chills. That is,
Yeah.
oh my God.
It was incredible. And that set me, not only did I develop a friendship with this woman until she passed away many years later, but it gave me what I needed to get, started with the book to start writing this about this young boy who was also like me, like someone who, even though I was verbal as a child, I was very isolated and withdrawn and I couldn't express to others what I was experiencing. So me and the main character, Eddie, were very much in sync.
And you cannot get more clear confirmation than that.
Right.
Like that.
Right. Yeah,
I want that
definitely.
kind of confirmation all the time. Yes. Oh,
Exactly.
I love it. So, so you wrote the book.
Yes. I
Okay.
wrote the book, published the book. Yes.
Oh, amazing. Is it available on Amazon? Where can
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's also the link on my website, one of the pages on my website. You can get it in paperback and also in the Kindle version. And it's really it's a thriller. It's got crime, it's got fantasy, it's got Eddie with, him learning how to be in the world, in this world that's so foreign to him, which was again what I was going through. Like, I was trying to conform for so many years when I was in school or in my career. It was just all about conformity until I made the transition to authenticity later. But it's really about his struggle with how to do that, how to be in the world.
I love that. So after you wrote the book, or maybe concurrently, did you shift into something different for a career?
Yeah, actually, it changed my entire career. That book led me to, which is amazing. Another thing when I was looking for a job, and tried, sent out my resume to all these places for marketing jobs or sales jobs, which was my experience. Nothing. I wasn't even getting calls, nothing. And I was getting really frustrated. And again, it was another thing. I was just like, doing something else, getting changed in the morning or something. And all of a sudden I thought of a local community college. I have no idea why, but I went to their website. They were hiring an autism like program coordinator at the time, to run a program for people with intellectual disabilities, which included autism, but they didn't want to exclude anyone, so all intellectual disabilities, to give young people, young adults, the opportunity to attend college, to be on a college campus. And that was like, I loved it. I got hired for that job. I loved it. That actually led for me to work for the state of Massachusetts for many years, in the autism division. So I was working with, like adults, or I was in the program for people who were age 18 and over who had autism, but wanted the college experience or wanted full-time work and wanted, all the things that we enjoy as well in our careers. So that was a really fulfilling career, and it all became, just like one thing after another, just unfolded over the years until I felt it was the right time to leave the autism world and spend, 100% of my time on my spiritual work, which was a big leap, as it is for a lot of people. I'm sure for you as well.
It's so scary.
Yeah,
Yes.
it
You
really is.
have to, I like what you said about trying to conform. I have found too that every time I try to conform, spirit, intuition, like what we all call it something different, right? I don't want to exclude anybody listening, but whatever that pull is, that connection is, it will just, it's like blocks are set up. And like I literally can't move any other way than that one way I'm supposed to go. It's like the
Yes.
only, and it's my desire has been to follow it faster, to follow it sooner,
Mm.
and I think that can be tricky. So um, I'm curious what your take is on, because I think what can tend to stop me and a lot of other women is trying to discern fear versus intuition.
Ah, yes.
I would love your,
Huge.
right. So I would love your take on that, because we get all these roadblocks, and oftentimes, had we just listened to ourselves to begin with, those roadblocks wouldn't have even needed to be there, but fear comes into play. So I'd love to hear what you think about this.
Yeah, that's a big one for me as well, because fear leads to doubt, right? So even though I'm confident in my intuition, it's like I still go, well, wait a minute, am I making this up? Is this
Yeah.
just my imagination, or is this my fear talking? How do I know? If I'm doing a session for a client, it's clear as day to me. It's not an issue,
Oh,
but
it's so easy for other
right.
people.
Right. But when it comes to me, it's a little different, right? Because I get my own stuff in the way, and we all have our own past experiences and our family experiences and childhood and all that stuff that gets in the way. So the first thing what I try to teach when I teach my classes is to explain that that's our process. In order to really learn to trust our own intuition, we got to get all the other crap out of the way. We have to, let go or put aside what others might think of us, like, oh, you're weird, or yeah, just being different. Also, the fear of being wrong, like, oh my gosh, what if I, leave this job and start my business, but it's the wrong thing to do. What do I do?
Yeah.
So a couple of things that I share with people that help me along the way. Number one is when an intuition or an inspiration comes to you out of the blue, like it did for me in those experiences I shared. It's like, I'm just doing something else. I'm not really thinking about anything, but all of a sudden it's just like light bulbs, sirens, fireworks going off. It's like everything stops except this one thought. So that for me is clearly my intuition. And it's similar if you're, you might have had the experience where you're again doing something like doing the dishes, and all of a sudden someone's name's, that pops into your head, and you're like, oh, maybe I should email her, check on her, see how she's doing. That's your intuition. And the other way is the opposite, which I know makes it a little confusing, but the opposite is when spirit comes knocking and it's repetitive over and over and over again. And some people say that is, typically with numbers, we see repeated numbers or signs here and there. For me, it could be anything from the word to a name to, something I see on the license plate, to the name of a business, to something on TV. I mean, I've had experiences like where the word just comes over and over and over again until I finally go, okay, I get it. Okay. So that for me is intuition. And then other than that, intuition is always expansive. It's always light. It's always like going to the next level. My fear-based thoughts are always contracting. Oh, hiding. No, I don't want to do that. Yeah. Too scary, too hard. It feels very different. And when you get better at it, then you just make better decisions for yourself in your life.
Absolutely. And I would just add that as far as fear goes, I agree with you. My intuition, I always feel expansive. It's very still.
Yeah.
And like, even though it's like pulsating, like waiting for you to come to it, like to join with, it's like just still and calm and expansive and light, all of like what you said. I tend to recognize, because an intuitive no for me is like almost like a little knot in my stomach and a little click, like sort of like asking me to pull away from the thing. But again, it's not, I don't feel impending doom, like when fear is shouting. And something else I notice with fear is that's when I start to ruminate. That's when I like get out of my body and I'm in my head, I'm overthinking, analyzing all of those things. So that for me is a trigger to go, come back, like listen to what the intuitive voice is saying.
Right. Right. And that's what takes practice, really, of trusting it. But I like when you said pulsating, because that's definitely what I get when it's my intuition and spirit is trying to tell me something. It's like over and over and over again until I get it.
Yeah. And like with fear, at least for me, I'm curious if this is for you too. Like it's like super loud and wants to be heard. It's like having a temper tantrum almost.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because it's almost like ego death, right? Like the personality doesn't want to accept that you're going to maybe do something different, so like I get all that part of it. But then it will die away. Like if I don't give it any attention, it will go away. But like you said, with the intuitive nudges, they're not going anywhere until you pay attention.
Yes, exactly. And I agree with you. And in fact, I think before I let it go away, that fear-based thought, I name it. I name it for what it is. And I'm like, if this is my ego, I'm going to say it's my ego. If this is, fear of rejection, I'm going to say it for what it is. And that takes the power away, is what I notice, is it really does. And then it's like easier to let it go and just go, oh, I know. Or if it's something that feels like it's an old fear coming back, something that I worked on or something, I'm like, oh, I used to think that way. I don't think that way. That used to be, and I don't think that way anymore, because there are things that you'll feel, like someone who, let's say, has a fear of spiders or something, it's like, even though they've worked on it, they're still going to be uncomfortable around the spider, but they can realize that, oh, I used to be terrified and run from the room, but now I'm okay. I'm safe here in the presence of this spider or fear or whatever the fear is. So naming it sometimes helps.
Oh, every time. It's like, it's that psychological distancing component. And I think too that naming it allows you to be in the present moment with it. Right. Because fear wants to pull you out of the present moment, right? And it will, if there is some sort of trauma or whatever attached to the fear, whatever's causing the fear, then it will grab onto like the last memory you have or some, profound memory and drag you right back into it. Whereas intuition is like, just be here in the present moment. I always say it like moment to moment. It's just like in that moment, what's the next best thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we live in a world where many people struggle with anxiety and depression. And anxiety is fear of the future, and depression is, old energies and memories from the past. So when you're not present, you're in that anxiety, depression. You're kind of bouncing back and forth until you can, again, name it for what it is and be present. I totally agree with you on that. Yeah.
I love that. So, what's your take on some of the barriers that women face in trusting themselves, really, their intuition, but themselves?
Well, I think a lot of it is the need to conform, like we mentioned, to feel like if I'm different, where am I going to fit in? Right. So if I'm in my, a corporate world, I'm working every day, I'm going to the office, I'm working with all these different people. If I don't conform, I might get fired, I might get in trouble, I might do, if I don't do that, if I speak up for myself, it's going to somehow backlash. So I think that's a big fear, is just that if we're in our authenticity, that we're going to be ostracized maybe, or forced to change our relationships, which are really hard. When I was ready to start telling people about my intuition when I was older and had done that work, the reactions were not all loving and kind, and people reacted with their own fear or shame or humiliation, and that was really tough. So I think a lot of the fear is, for a woman to decide, is it worth it? Like once she decides, okay, I'm going to be my authentic self, I'm going to share who I am and put it out in the world, and it's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it. And that's the key, I think, to help people deal with that fear, because it is overwhelming and it can really stop you in your tracks for a long time.
It sure can. And I like that you said something like it's a projection of their shame and fear and all of that. And I think it's so important to remember that people's reactions to us really have nothing to do with us. It's like all their stuff.
Right. Yeah. And it's definitely true. And it's hard for us, again, if we're in the world, and then to say, okay, well, none of their opinions matter, none of my family, my loved ones, it's hard. It's easy when it's a stranger and, in the store, and you're like, whatever, I don't care what that person thinks.
Right.
But another thing I think is that one thing that helps women is to really pay attention what triggers us. So that's why I think naming it helps. It's something like, if when you were a kid, somebody said you were stupid or something, and it's like, if you're not stupid, you're never going to think about it again, right? You're not going to bother with it. But if there's something in you that says, oh, am I smart enough? Can I do this? Am I stupid? That's what's going to stay with you and affect your decisions. So that's why being able to name it and say, oh, that's just because, I believed it at some point, along the way, that someone said I was stupid and I believed it, and that's all it is, but that's who I was. And that might help.
I agree. And I love that you shared that particular piece about, oh, I used to believe that, because just because it confronts you in the moment doesn't mean it could just be old energy clearing out. It doesn't mean, and you get to decide, right, whether you want to hold on to it or not in every moment.
Yeah.
There's, I've used that in the past for myself and with clients, like something that was triggering them in the moment. We would say something like, oh, remember when that used to trigger me? Like, not to deny what you're feeling, of course, like you don't want to repress anything, but then to be like, okay, but this is in the past. Whatever you need to use to be like, I'm not hanging on to this anymore.
Yeah. And just to be able to have that awareness to say, this is the way, because when we're in it, we don't have that awareness, right? We're triggered. We're like, it's happening right now. Even if it happened 30 years ago, it doesn't matter. Right. It feels like it's happening right now. So for
Yes.
you to be able to have your client acknowledge that and say, oh, yes, I've come a long way. That used to trigger me pretty big. And now I'm okay. I'm not comfortable with it maybe, but it's like now I'm not, again, running away from it. Makes a big difference.
It does. And I like to think of it like if you can be aware of the trigger, you're not in the trigger anymore.
Yes, I definitely.
Definitely shifted perspective. And so it doesn't, you're not giving it power anymore.
Right. And I also think, and it sounds like what you were alluding to too, is that we don't have to fix all this stuff all at once. We have,
Or
we have
even
time
at all, really. Like
yeah.
the more we try to fix, the more we stay stuck in it. Not that there isn't work to, I mean, it's a line, you got to figure it out, it's unique, but I agree, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I work with clients who are grieving, the loss of a loved one, and they're like, I know I should let this go, but I'm not ready to. And people think I should go back to work. And I'm like, you don't have to, right? You can take your time with the grieving. It doesn't matter if it's a loved one or a pet or your relationship or your job or whatever it was that you're grieving. You don't have to force yourself to do it and go through it and face it right away. You can do it in the little steps along the way. And that I think makes people feel better, because I think there's also some, I don't know, some energy or something about how we have to like get over it and move on and do it and let it go. And it's like sometimes it can't, because it's layered, it has so many layers to it. You can't just turn it off.
Right. It's layered and it's unique. And for me, it always comes back to if you think you should do something, there's a forcing energy there. And the more you try to force, the more you stay stuck in it.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I'm like, good, you sit with it. You be in it. Keep
Right.
being in it. You're good.
Right. Right. And if it's grief, even though it's not comfortable for some people, it makes them feel better to be in the grief for that moment. Yes. Until they can move to the other emotions, as they go through the process.
And that brings me to another point. I'm curious what you think about validation in terms of barriers, because I think far too often there's no validation for what women are experiencing simply because it's a sense that can't be quantified.
Yeah.
But that I self-validate or I offer space for another woman and validate it's like the power is immense after that.
Yeah, that's why I'm very interested in building community. That's why women with community and connection and communion, because it's so hard to validate ourselves, right? I mean, I could say to spirit, oh, show me a sign that this is the right decision, and I'll get a sign. Okay, that's great. But then the old me would also doubt that sign and go, oh, is that right? Or, I did ask to see the red car on the road, which I saw, but was it red enough? We start doubting all of that. I know.
So true.
And really, when I was opening up and developing my intuition, having that tribe was huge. I had, lots of wonderful teachers in all different modalities. I had people telling me, you're not making this up. Like what you're seeing is real. It's true. It's really happening. So having that, and again, having, some friends who validate me as well, and we validate each other is huge. So it's because it's still sometimes hard to do it yourself.
That's a practice in and of itself. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you could offer women just one tip about how to tune into their intuition and trust it, what would it be?
What I like to share with people, what I do, what helps me for myself, is I need things that are easy, practical, and fast in order for me to make things work and for me to get things. And what I do is if I'm really, like you said, like not sure what to do, I've got decision to make, I'm not sure how to feel about it, is I start with my heart, because your heart is the receiver, the processor of all the intuition. Even though we think our third eye does all the work, it really doesn't. It's the receiver. Like we express it through our third eye, but we receive through our heart. So your heart knows what the truth is and what's best for you. And what I do is you might have heard like the spark of light or the diamond within our heart, the diamond core cell that's within our heart space. It's there, but sometimes it's hard to see, within ourselves. So I just imagine the sunlight. I just imagine as if there's the warmth of the sunlight that I start to feel first on my upper chest. And then I realize that it's actually coming from within me. And it's fast and it's easy. And then what I do is I make that connection first, and then I trust my gut, like you were saying, like what's going on my core self. And I actually, I when I first started, I would actually put my hand on my belly, right on my belly, and I would phrase a question of myself, right from my heart, a yes or no question, and a yes would always like push my hand out on my belly. It's like inflating a balloon. It would it's light, it's expansive. Again, it's intuition. And if the answer was no, then my hand would kind of pull in towards, my belly towards my back. So it would be like a contraction or a more sinking feeling. And I practiced that for a while until I didn't have to put my hand there anymore. And now I just do it without even, because it's so natural to me. I don't even finish the thought in my mind and I'm getting the yes or no. Like, should I do this? Should I go here? We have so many events in our lives we have to go to, but it's like, oh, do I want to go to this one or do I want to go to that one? And just being able to tune into myself to get a quick yes or a quick no made a world of difference for me.
Okay, amazing. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. I used to take what I would call intuitive drives, and I would just,
Love it.
okay, which way do I go, and see where I landed. And every single time I would experience what I can only call magic, like the synchronicities that would happen. But like you're alluding to, like it's a practice. You have to keep, and I think it's like whatever works for you, right? Like I love, it's so important to be in tune with your body. So I love that you shared that practice of like really being in tune with your body.
Mhm.
But since we're all different, I think it's so important to like do some research, like you said, find your people and find out what the best practice for you is.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many like tools, and I mean everything from oracle cards to pendulums to muscle testing, kind of like what I do. And there's so many things to try and learn. That's what I encourage people to do. Yeah, find what works for you. What I know what works for me is like fast, easy, practical because
Yes.
I'm in the
Yeah.
moment. But for some people, they want to really like mull it over and think about it. So find what works for you.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I love all that you shared. So, so good.
Thank you, Melissa. This was great.
And if women want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
The best thing is to go to my website, which is just my name, leahmhill.com. I also have my email, which is on the website as well. It's just leah@leahmhill.com. You can find out information about the book that I mentioned, about my upcoming classes and events, and also about booking a private session. And I also do group readings. I do education. I do a little of everything. And then you can also get information about Apollo Sunrise Center, which I'll be opening later this year in Northeastern Massachusetts, which is going to be a wellness and health and wellness and spiritual retreat center and a horse farm too. So it's also going to be a working horse farm. So all that information is on my website.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. It's good to talk to you.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. If you feel that this episode will help another woman, please share it. Until next time.